Hello, I'm Pearl Howie, and welcome to Authentic Success Your Way. I hear all the time from people how much they want to go on retreat, so I thought I would bring you to the wonderful Crouchers Orchards Hotel. It's still early, the sun is still coming up, and they're serving breakfast still. But it's a beautiful place to come and take some time out to relax. This is a series of 7 videos, a journey, even what you might call a retreat, a way, a pilgrimage, a Camino. We're going to go to the beach, we're going to go down to the woods, and we're going to find some places in nature where you can relax, let go, and feel safe to feel your own feelings. I've been one of those people that has had success, or what I might call a notion of success. The time when I had the flat, the car, the job, the friends, the parties. But inside, I felt like I was dying. I felt like I was living what we call a living death, because I wasn't letting myself do any of the things that I loved. I wasn't writing, I wasn't dancing, I wasn't being me. I wasn't making films. So sometimes our authentic success is just about opening up to the things that we have closed off. Sometimes it's about making big changes. Sometimes just very tiny adjustments to where we are. But we often feel that we need something else because we know things are just not quite in alignment. Now, I've studied with Native American shaman, and the ancient shaman all knew the truth that the answers are within you. So these exercises, these workshops are just about reflecting back to you what you know inside. So you don't have to do them all, you don't have to do them in order, but they are practices that I have used for many years to find my own way to my authentic success. And we're also going to talk about fear of success. And one thing I have learned is that every single person will face fear of success in their lives. It's the most normal thing in the world. So I hope you'll use these videos as a retreat if you're not able to come away and go on a retreat with me right now. Perhaps one day you will join me here at Crouchers Orchards or another retreat, or find another one that is perfect for your needs. I hope these videos will help you to find your own way, and that I see you down the road on both our ways. Namaste, and I hope you enjoy. See you at the end of the road. Welcome to Authentic Success Action, the dunk. So for the dunk, we're really going to be using all the same things that we used for the dip. So for this one, I do recommend you watch the dip first, because we need to still remember all those practical things about staying safe. But for the dunk, it's a slightly different type of action. For the dip, it was really about having a taste, putting a little toe in the water. For the dunk, it's going all in. Now, very often when you start doing, any kind of sort of life coaching or self-help or personal development, you're going to hear a lot of inspirational stuff about, take the leap, jump, go all in, all that kind of stuff. But it's really, really important to remember that sometimes a dunk is a really good idea. Sometimes taking that leap of faith is a great idea. Sometimes it's not. And one story that always comes to mind when I think about this was the way my grandfather tried to teach me how to swim. It's the way he taught all his kids how to swim, and as many of his grandchildren as dared, which was get in the sea And what he would do is he would hold his arms out, you know, and you'd lie in his arms, and he'd go kick, 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 kick your legs, and you know, swim with your arms, and eventually, and he would take his arms away. And for most people, it worked in that they suddenly realised they were swimming. Very much like, you know, when you're trying to learn to ride a bike and somebody sort of holding onto the back, and all of a sudden you're riding a bike on your own. So this was his way of teaching his children and grandchildren to swim. But unfortunately, it really didn't work for me. And what happened was he would say, oh, I'm going to do this. And I say, no, I'm not doing it, because you always let go. And then I would sink like a stone to the bottom of the sea, and I would be having salt water going up my nose and in my eyes and everything. And I'd go, oh no, I hate this. And he would say, I would say to him, no, I'm not doing it because you'll let go. And he would say, I promise I won't. I promise I won't. And I'd say, okay. He'd do it every time he would drop his arms, because that was his way of getting us out there and getting us to swim. And it didn't work for me. And in fact, it took me a really, really long time to learn how to swim. And swimming lessons, still didn't learn to swim. Eventually kind of taught myself in the swimming pool. And it took me really years and years to learn to swim with my face in the water, to be able to go down and do a duck dive in the water. And eventually I went and did free diving in Mexico. And it was a wonderful session, great team instructor. And as I went down, I felt this terrible fear come up. And I realised that fear had really been caused by the way my granddad tried to teach me how to swim. And I realised also that for most people that would work and it wouldn't hurt them, because by the time he was trying to teach me how to swim, I already had a lot of trust issues. I had a lot of problems with trusting people. So every time he would say, I'm not going to let you go, and then he did, I felt so betrayed and let down. It took me decades to really figure that out. It wasn't his fault, because he taught his kids to swim that way. He taught so many people to swim that way. He was a wonderful teacher, a wonderful granddad. But for me, it was just the wrong thing. So don't do that to yourself, and don't let anybody else do that to you. When you have something that you want to do, an action that you want to do or you can only do as a dunk, think about if it's appropriate for you, if it's the right time, think about the consequences, and then let's go. So a dunk really can start sometimes when you've almost done it, when you've almost jumped off a cliff. But sometimes it starts a long time before that, and it starts with the gearing up. So I wanted to share with you the gearing up for creating these workshops. Okay, so a little behind the scenes. I've got everything set up to go and film at Crouchers tomorrow. And you know better than me right now how it all went. Did it go okay? I don't know. But this is me getting ready, finding the right bag that I want to use. Got my tripod, my trusty tripod. Got my trusty little bit that goes in there so I can attach my phone. Not taking all of this, although I guess I could, I could go and put it in. Maybe I need to tell myself to relax. Do I take water with me, or is there going to be enough water there? Do I need to take my cookies? Do I need to take snacks? All my cables, different cables here. And of course, my Bible, the original book of practical training, which I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna sit down and do some color coding of that today. So when I went on my Camino, I had to start gearing up a little bit in advance, because I had to get a new passport. I had to get a rucksack. And the action of gearing up, the action of going out, and I had to go to all these shops and try on lots of rucksacks. It made it feel real. And it also made it feel so often in that time of, I can't do this, I can't do this. So all the time I was gearing up, all those feelings were coming up. All that fear of success was coming up, of what if this happens? What if that happens? What do I need to take in my first aid kit? Do I need to take plasters? Do I need to take rehydration salts? All things like that. And you're the only one that knows what your authentic success is, okay? And what kind of dunk you're going to be doing. You know, there's a few things I could suggest, but ultimately it's all down to you. So you have to think about what gear you need. And what I've discovered is if you miss out on a lot of things, it's okay. You can get them along the way. And one thing I found, so today I was all set. I had, so everything's ready for tomorrow. And then last night, I kind of had a bit of an injury on my finger. So today has all been about figuring out what plasters I have, what plasters I need. And guess what? I went downstairs to the shop and they had the right plasters in there. So, well, I hope they're the right plasters. I think I'll be okay. We can't really know everything that we might need. And sometimes we put things off because we think we need more and more and more gear. The gear that we have is never going to be exactly perfect. We're always going to have things that we don't end up using and things that we wish we brought along. I wanted you to have that experience of what gearing up is like and the emotions that we get as we're going through that process of gearing up. What gear do you need if you're going to do a dunk? And the first book of my Camino de la Luna series is called Take What You Need. So why do we have to do a dunk? Well, some things we can't go halfway in. If I get on a plane, I'm ending up at my destination. So getting on that plane is a dunk. But it doesn't mean to say I have to stay there when I get there. I can quite easily get on another plane, turn around and come back again. If I take the leap off a cliff into the ocean, I'm not going to stay in the ocean. I'm then going to swim my way out and get back to the shore. So it's also important to think about what we could call an exit strategy. When we're taking a dunk, it doesn't necessarily mean that's it for the rest of our lives. If we're taking the plunge to get married, we may think about things like even a prenup, so that when we decide, or if we decide, actually this isn't right for me, we're not in too tricky a situation. So these are the kind of things we think about with the dunk. Say I want to start my own company. Maybe I want to start a company with somebody else. Think it through, make a plan. Sometimes the only way we are going to feel ready to take a dunk, to take that leap of faith, that action, is when we've already worked out the exit strategy. So we know that we have a fallback position. If I'm going travelling, I have my travel insurance. If I'm starting a company, I know I've got a budget to help me survive until it really takes off. If I'm going to jump into the ocean, then I know how to get back out, how to get warm, how to get dry. And I know that the water is reasonably clean and safe. These are the kind of things we think about when we're going to do a dunk. So when we're doing a dunk, very often we need support. And I always say this to people because sometimes, when we're doing something, there's an idea that there's something wrong with us if we need support, if we need therapy, if we need a helpline. And honestly, I really hope we're moving towards the idea that we all need support. We all need support at different times. So when you're doing a dunk, when you're planning your dunk, whatever it is going to be, think about the kind of support that you might need. You don't have to ask for it straight away. You could just line it up, know where it is. Something that once upon a time when you were traveling, you would be told to have the number of the embassy in case you got into trouble. Now we just Google it, it's easier. But before, I remember before the internet, some of you may remember before the internet, when I used to go traveling, I would have a list, I would list of hotels, a list of embassies, all kinds of emergency numbers, things like that. That used to be in the old travel guides, because you might need that support when you are out there on your path. So when we're taking a really huge action, what comes up for many of us is the wall. Now you may have heard of this in marathon running, and often around 15 miles of a 26 and a bit run, we hit the wall. And what does that wall feel like? It feels like everything is telling us to quit. It feels like everything is telling us that we cannot do this. And a lot of runners will call it more of like a mental thing, something that comes in your mind when your ego gets in there, but also you feel like the road just feels impossibly long. But that wall is really important just to be aware of, because sometimes all of our senses, our mind, body and spirit just tells us this is impossible. And sometimes it's true. Sometimes, say for example, running a marathon, somebody really does need to stop before they do themselves permanent injury. So Paula Radcliffe in the Athens Olympics had to stop running because she was so ill. And that's really important to remember when we're doing a dunk. It's not about forcing ourselves to do something. It's not about going for broke in the sense of destroying ourselves in the process, okay? We have to be really, really honest with ourselves. And I think that moment of honesty when we hit the wall is in many ways the reason for it. Okay? So very often if we go to, say, take an exam, when we hit the wall, it's when we realise, do we have it in us to pass the exam or not? Do we have it in us to finish the marathon or not? And sometimes when we sit down and we really look at it, we know that we can do it. We know that we can get there. We just have to not believe the liar in our head, not believe the ego when it's telling us that we are not capable of doing something. And at the end of this video, we're going to look at some really great ways, solutions to fear of success that we can use anytime we are telling ourselves that something is impossible, or anytime we feel that we really cannot take another step down our path. So this is a dunk I decided to take to have a go at, which is to come down and watch the sunset on the beach. And the reason this is a dunk is because when it gets dark, I have to walk back in the dark and there's no street lights in this section of the beach. So to me that was a little bit scary, and I built that up quite big in my head. So I've got my phone charged up so it can be a torch for me to get home. Also, it's one day after the full moon, and so the full moon should be coming up any minute now. So I have thought about this dunk and I'm trying to do it as safely as I can. But the thing is, once the sun goes down, I'm here and I'm stuck, and it's not a dip because it's not easy to get out again. Doesn't mean I'm going to stay down here, I'm not going to sleep here on the beach, but it's still, in some ways, it's a dunk. And because I'm on my own, perhaps it feels more like that. But it's something I wanted to do for a while. And the thing about taking any action, really, is that if we don't take an action, we're choosing not to take an action. And sometimes that can become kind of like a chronic hesitation, in that because we're not making a decision, we end up never doing the things that we want to. Perhaps we don't see the sunset this year. Perhaps it goes on to next year, to when it gets too cold to come out and do it, till it's wet and raining. So I just thought it's a good time to stop that chronic hesitation and just do it. Just come out and just be here while the sun sets. It turns out there's a lot more time after the sun sets than I remembered. So sunset a while ago and I could have got home by now. But I know the moon's coming up and I wanted to stay and see that as well. So we'll see if that shows up. If not, I'm going to head home pretty quickly. Sometimes when we do an action, whether it's a dip or a dunk, we don't really know why it calls to us, and we don't really know why it scares us sometimes until we actually do it. We can think about it, we can practice, rehearse it, but really it's in the doing and in the feeling that things become clear, and we can actually see why we've resisted some things for so long. So one of the ways we can just take that action is just go on a wing and a prayer. The moon doesn't seem to have come up, but it's actually a lot lighter than I expected, and I've got a light on my phone, and you know what, I know these paths pretty well as well, so it's working out. So far so good. And what it is about going on a wing and a prayer is it's not about being stupid, but it's just about trusting and really sort of trusting our heart and ourselves, that whatever we need, we will find along the way, or we'll find out that we just didn't really need it in the first place. And it's just the opposite of, packing a rucksack with every possible thing before we go anywhere or do anything. But the nice thing about doing this is I think, yeah, I can do this, and I'll do it again. But maybe I'll I'll do it next time when I know the moon is coming up a little bit earlier, just to be on the safe side. Anyway, this was kind of a fun exploration, fun adventure, and what I quite like about it is it's something I've been meaning to do for a long time, and I've been suffering from that chronic hesitation, and I can do it. Don't think about it, do it, then think about it. And I always have to put this sort of caveat in there, is I'm not talking about anything really reckless, and I'm not talking about doing something that is going to hurt anybody else. But sometimes, especially if we've been thinking about doing something for a really long time, it's important to just get on and do it, stop thinking. And I find this one works for me so much when there's something I want to do and I'm finding it really difficult to get past my own sort of mental barriers and blocks. And I'll go to bed and I'll have given up. I'll have said, yeah, I'm not going to do it. Forget about it. And I'll wake up at 3, 4, 5, 6 in the morning, and I'll either get out of bed and just go straight and do it, or sometimes I won't even get out of bed. So if it's something I could do on my phone or my laptop, like say book a flight, I'll get that out and book the flight and then think about it. So when I say don't think about it, it's often something I've been thinking about for months and months and months. But often having that energy first thing in the morning, I'll just do it and then think about it. Don't think about it, do it, then think about it. And I really have to credit my brother with telling me that so many times when I was trying to publish my first full colour book, Free, Feeling Real Emotions Every Day, because trying to publish that book was terrifying, and I really felt so many things holding me back. And when I pressed that button, it it just really felt like every fear I had about what could possibly go wrong in the world was really coming at me. And that's what I mean so often with fear of success. Sometimes we build up all these things in our minds to the point that it's almost like a phobia about doing something and a phobia about taking action. And I help a lot of people with publishing their books. And I'm really just kind of holding their hand, because for a lot of people, they've got to a point where they're so afraid to push that button. And like most things, the more you do, the easier it gets, because you realize all those little voices in your head saying terrible things are going to happen if you do this are just not real. But going through that fear is incredibly brave and often incredibly difficult. And a really powerful way that we can do the dunk, we can get past that fear of success, is to be the storyteller. So look at the stories you've told yourself about your life, about who you are, the labels that you carry. Look at the stories that other people have told you about who you are. Perhaps we have created an idea about what our life is going to be, our hero's journey, if you want to call it that, or our victim's journey, or the fact that we're always overshadowed by somebody else in our family. Perhaps we always come second. We are never the ones that win the awards. Look at the stories, discover the stories that you're telling yourself, and be the storyteller. Take back control of your story. Remember that it's up to you to write your own story, to choose where the path takes you next. What is your next chapter? And take back that power of the story of your life, your personal story, the story of your community, however you identify yourself, or the label you accept, the story of your family, the story of your ancestors, and choose, if you want, to change your story so that it leads you exactly to your own authentic success. And another solution to fear of success is to not feel the fear, okay? Now, Susan Jeffers wrote one of the best self-help books ever, which was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Fantastic book. And it's all about obviously not letting fear hold you back. But sometimes feeling the fear can be overwhelming. And I read all the time today on social media about how anxious people are, and even to the extent sometimes of having panic attacks. Now, when I say don't feel the fear, it's a lot like taking a painkiller. And what we want to be careful of, say for example, if we're taking a painkiller, is that we're not ignoring the pain. Okay, so what we want to be doing is addressing things, dealing with things, not just taking painkillers and not addressing the problem. Okay, so the same thing, we have to be really careful with this one, because we don't want to be reckless. When I say don't feel the fear, it's not about saying I'm not going to take care of myself. But when we're trying to overcome huge blocks and huge barriers, which are the way forward for us, sometimes we need ways to deal with the fear, the anxiety, and even the panic that comes up. And just to make it clear, when we feel that fear, it's not a failure. When we feel anxious, it's not a failure. As my great teacher, Don Miguel Ruiz, would say, very often we feel that because we've begun to fight the battle. Instead of just ignoring the problem, we've begun to fight. In the same way with pain, as a fitness instructor, often I'm working with people who are going from being very unfit to being healthy. And that process can be very, very painful. In the same way, this work that we are doing it can be a very, very fearful work because we're going through our fear. And sometimes we need to manage that fear or not feel it. Meditation is a fantastic way of doing it, but we have to be careful with how we use it. So now I want to teach you a very powerful way of looking at fear and meditation. This came to me after I'd been to Plum Village in France and spent the day with Buddhist monks and nuns. And we talked a lot about fear and about going down to the root of fear and finding out where that fear began and dealing with it in that way. And the next morning as I woke up, I had this realization, which was that our fear, whether it's for ourselves or for the people that we love, really comes from our desire to protect ourselves and protect them. So that fear is rooted in love. So if we take any fear that we are feeling, what we can do is go down into it, find the root of the fear, which is love. So if I am feeling fearful about my grandmother, I can help myself with the fear and even transform that fear by going down into the feelings through the fear to feeling and connecting with just how much I love her. And that way, what I'm doing is going down to the true feeling, the real feeling, the root of the fear, which is always love. That's just one way that we can not feel the fear. There are many other ways. I don't recommend anything unhealthy, but that's one of the ways that we can use things like meditation or even music, powerful music, to get us motivated, get us moving, and let go of any fear that's holding us back from taking the action, from taking the next step in our journey. Do the thing you cannot do. Well, when I've been on retreats, physically gone on retreat, I've done really amazing things like firewalking, like climbing pyramids. But the reason that we do the thing we cannot do is because it changes the way that we think, what we believe. And I remember when I went to a retreat in Sedona, I had a big 4x4 Jeep, and the retreat centre was miles up this very bumpy little road. And as I drove up, I was so slow, and I was driving like this. And cars would come up behind me, and they kept passing me, going past. And I was terrified, driving as fast as I could. Then I went on the retreat, and I did the firewalk. And in the firewalk, what I realised is, yes, it's going to hurt, but I can do it. And when we do the thing we cannot do, I cannot do any of this, and yet I'm doing it. But what we do when we do the thing that we cannot do is we overcome. We do the thing even if we do it badly. But when we do it, we realise, I've done it. It's possible. It is possible. We go past the feeling that we cannot do it. And when I drove back along that bumpy little road, this time I had a passenger, and she was terrified because as I drove back down that road, I was going at speed thinking, yes, this is great, and I can do anything that I want. And I think sometimes when we're thinking about taking a dunk, it can seem foolish, it can seem dangerous, it can seem daring. And sometimes when that happens, I have to stop and remind myself that really what we're doing, almost all of us, is taking like 100 dunks a day. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there are a lot of ways that we are putting ourselves out there, taking risks, taking action or inaction that could have huge consequences if things went wrong, but we don't perceive them as that because we feel so safe and secure, because we trust. Okay? So maybe I decide to go somewhere for the day and I trust that the train is safe. I trust that the train will bring me home. I trust that the bus will run. I trust that the driver will get me home. If I go to work and I put in a month's work expecting to be paid at the end, it's a huge risk, but I don't perceive it as a huge risk because I do it every month or every week. If I go to a restaurant and I eat in a kitchen, I take a huge leap of faith because I'm trusting them to serve up something that's healthy and safe for me to eat. When I drink water out of the tap, I'm trusting that that water is safe and clean. But it's a huge risk to drink that water because I'm putting my safety in somebody else's hands. So sometimes we can forget that all of these little things that we do throughout a day are really ways that we are leaning back and falling backwards, trusting that someone is going to catch us, trusting that the support is going to be there for us. So sometimes it's really useful to think about things in that way, because then we realise that perhaps what we're looking at doing, although it's a dunk, although we're taking a leap of faith, is really not as big of a challenge as our ego might try to tell us it is. Sometimes it feels so scary to change the way that we do things. If we're working full time, perhaps we want to become self-employed. Perhaps we want to give up a self-employed business, take a permanent contract. Perhaps we want to leave a relationship. Perhaps we want to start a relationship. Perhaps we want to even quit the gym or change our bank. These things can all feel huge to us. Anytime we're making a big shift in our lives, it can feel like a dunk. It can feel like life-changing, overwhelming, huge, and also magnificent.